He could buy any technology, but he could not stop the darkening of his own son's eyes. Until a poor girl, with gentle hands and a firm voice, appeared saying she could help him see again. What seemed like an act of empathy turned into a miracle, and the discovery that she was in fact his lost daughter. If you were touched by this beautiful story of resilience and love, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. Robert Mitchell surveyed the Boston skyline from his penthouse office in the Medivision Tower. The crisp autumn air painted the city in gold and crimson, but he barely noticed the spectacle. His attention was fixed on the quarterly reports that had just come in from his medical technology branches across 5 continents. The numbers were exceptional, as always. He tapped his Mont Blanc pen against the polished mahogany desk, a habit that signaled satisfaction to those who knew him well. At 52, Robert had built an empire from a single patent he'd developed in his MIT dorm room 30 years ago. Medivision Technologies specialized in cutting-edge diagnostic equipment that had revolutionized early detection of various conditions. The company's latest innovation, a retinal scanning device that could identify 17 different pathologies in seconds, was poised to become the industry standard. Mr. Mitchell, his assistant, Claire, appeared at the doorway. "Your son's school called again. They said it's urgent this time." Robert frowned. "This was the 3rd call this week. What is it now?" "They didn't specify, sir. Just asked that you pick Ethan up personally." He checked his watch, 2:15 p.m. He had a video conference with investors in Shanghai at 3. "Reschedule Shanghai for tomorrow morning. Tell Thompson to cover the basics without me." "Yes, sir." Claire hesitated. "And the governor's office called about the charity gala next month. They'd like confirmation on your—" "I'll handle it later," he said, already reaching for his jacket. "Have Michael bring the car around." 30 minutes later, Robert strode through the halls of Brookline Academy, an exclusive private school where tuition cost more than what many families earned in a year. The pristine corridors were adorned with student artwork and academic trophies, a testament to the institution's excellence. The school nurse, Mrs. Peterson, met him outside her office, her expression grave. "Mr. Mitchell, thank you for coming. I've been quite concerned about Ethan today." "What happened?" Robert's tone was more demanding than questioning. "He had another incident in physical education class. He collided with another student during basketball, said he didn't see him coming." She lowered her voice. "And his literature teacher mentioned that Ethan has been holding his books unusually close to his face." Robert's jaw tightened. "Where is he?" "In my office. I've given him a quiet place to rest." He complained about the fluorescent lights giving him a headache. When Robert entered, he found his 12-year-old son sitting in a dimly lit corner, head bowed over a book. Ethan looked up, squinting slightly, his blue eyes, so much like his late mother's, struggling to focus. "Dad? You didn't have to come. I told them I was fine." Robert studied his son's face. Ethan had always been small for his age, with a thoughtful demeanor that sometimes made him seem older than his years. His sandy blonde hair fell across his forehead, nearly touching the wire-rimmed glasses he'd started wearing last year. "Let's go home," Robert said simply, extending his hand. The ride back to their Beacon Hill townhouse was quiet. Robert observed how Ethan kept his eyes closed for most of the journey, occasionally rubbing them as if to clear his vision. "The headaches again?" Robert finally asked. Ethan nodded. "It's not that bad. Just... everything's a little blurry today. And bright, really bright." Robert had dismissed the first few complaints as normal childhood ailments, or perhaps a need for stronger glasses. But something about the frequency and progression of these symptoms triggered an unfamiliar sensation in his chest. Fear. At home, their housekeeper, Mrs. Sullivan, greeted them with surprise. "I wasn't expecting you both so early. Is everything all right?" "Fine," Robert answered curtly. "Ethan needs to rest." No disturbances. He guided his son upstairs to his bedroom, a spacious area filled with books, a top-of-the-line computer setup, and scientific models that reflected the boy's curious mind. Ethan immediately closed the blinds, dimming the room to a comfortable twilight. "Dad, you can go back to work. I know you're busy." Robert sat on the edge of the bed. "I'm calling Dr. Hoffman. I want him to take another look at your eyes. We just saw him last month. He said my prescription was fine. We're getting a second opinion." Robert's tone left no room for argument. "I'm also going to have Thompson from our research division look into some specialists." Ethan sighed, removing his glasses to rub his eyes again. "I'm scared," he admitted in a small voice that made him sound much younger. The vulnerability in those two words caught Robert off guard. Since losing his wife to complications during childbirth 12 years ago, he'd approached parenthood as he did his business, with efficiency, providing everything money could buy while maintaining emotional distance. It was easier that way. Sarah's absence had left a void he couldn't fill, so he'd focused instead on creating a legacy Ethan could inherit someday. "You don't need to be," Robert said, awkwardly patting his son's shoulder. "Whatever this is, we'll fix it. That's what I do. I fix things." That evening, after Ethan had fallen asleep, Robert sat in his home office making calls. By midnight, he had arranged appointments with 3 top ophthalmologists, requested his company's research team to compile all recent studies on visual impairments in adolescents, and emailed the school to inform them Ethan would be absent for the rest of the week. He poured himself 2 fingers of Macallan 25, a ritual reserved for nights when the weight of responsibility felt particularly heavy. The amber liquid caught the light as he swirled it, creating patterns that reminded him of Sarah's eyes, the same eyes that now struggled to see in their son. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Thompson. Made contact with Dr. Eliza Chen at Johns Hopkins, leading researcher in retinal disorders, can see Ethan next Tuesday. Robert replied immediately, "Book it, send the jet." Control. That's what had always defined Robert Mitchell's existence. Control over his company, his environment, his emotions. But as he stood in the doorway of his sleeping son's room, watching the gentle rise and fall of Ethan's chest, he confronted an uncomfortable truth. Some things existed beyond the reach of even his considerable power. The week that followed was a blur of medical appointments. Robert cleared his schedule, delegating responsibilities to his executive team for the first time in years. They visited specialists in Boston, New York, and Baltimore. Each consultation followed the same pattern: comprehensive examinations, cautious observations, and inconclusive results. Then came the appointment with Dr. Chen at Johns Hopkins. Unlike the others, she requested additional tests, specialized scans that measured the electrical activity in Ethan's retinas and optic nerves. "Mr. Mitchell," she said when they returned for the results, her voice gentle but direct, "I believe Ethan is showing early signs of Stargardt macular dystrophy. It's a rare genetic condition that causes progressive deterioration of the macula, the central part of the retina responsible for sharp, detailed vision." Robert's expression remained impassive, a mask perfected through decades of high-stakes business negotiations. "What's the treatment protocol?" Dr. Chen's pause told him everything before she even spoke. "I'm afraid there is currently no approved treatment that can stop or reverse the progression. Research is ongoing, but what about experimental treatments, clinical trials?" Robert interrupted. "There are several promising avenues of research, including gene therapy and stem cell treatments, but these are years away from clinical application." "And the prognosis?" Dr. Chen looked directly at Ethan, including him in the conversation rather than talking over him. "The condition typically progresses over time. Many people with Stargardt's retain some peripheral vision, but central vision, used for reading, recognizing faces, and detailed tasks, becomes increasingly compromised." "Will I go blind?" Ethan asked quietly. "The degree of vision loss varies from person to person," Dr. Chen answered honestly. "Most patients experience significant visual impairment, typically reaching legal blindness, though complete blindness is rare." On the private flight back to Boston, Ethan slept, exhausted from the emotional toll of the diagnosis. Robert sat across from him, laptop open but untouched, his mind racing through possibilities. He'd built his fortune by identifying problems and engineering solutions. This was just another problem to solve. A complex one, certainly, but not unsolvable. Not for him. As the plane began its descent into Boston, Ethan stirred, blinking awake. "Dad? Are we home?" "Almost," Robert replied, looking at his son, truly looking at him, perhaps for the first time in years. In that moment, he made a silent vow. He would move heaven and earth to preserve the light in those eyes. The following weeks transformed Robert Mitchell's carefully ordered life into a chaotic pursuit of hope. His expansive home office became a war room, walls covered with medical research papers, treatment protocols, and contact information for specialists around the globe. Every morning began with conference calls to researchers in Europe. Evenings ended with updates from clinical labs in Asia. For the first time in his career, the quarterly earnings report from Medivision sat unopened on his desk. "We've located a specialist in Zurich," reported Dr. Thompson during their daily briefing. Dr. Hoffman's approach using antioxidant therapy has shown promising results in slowing progression in similar retinal conditions. Robert's eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. Book it. When can he see us? There's a 3-month waiting list, but unacceptable. Make it happen this week. Robert's tone made it clear that conventional constraints like waiting lists didn't apply to him. What about the team at UCLA? Any updates on their stem cell research? Thompson hesitated. They're still in preclinical trials, sir. Human applications are years away at best. Years, Robert repeated, the word tasting bitter. Ethan doesn't have years. His last visual field test showed a 12% decrease in central acuity in just 3 weeks. Mr. Mitchell, Thompson said carefully, I understand your urgency, but these researchers are already working at maximum capacity. Some processes simply can't be accelerated beyond certain biological limitations. Robert slammed his fist on the desk. That's not good enough. I've built an empire on doing what others claimed was impossible. I refuse to accept defeat now. After Thompson left, Robert stood at the window, watching the evening shadows stretch across Boston Common. The irony wasn't lost on him. As his son's world grew darker, he found himself more acutely aware of light and shadow than ever before. Downstairs he could hear Ethan practicing piano. The boy had always been musically gifted, with a sensitivity that Robert sometimes found disconcerting, a trait inherited from Sarah, who had played with the Boston Symphony Orchestra before her pregnancy. The melody floated through the house, a Chopin nocturne that Sarah had loved, now rendered with occasional hesitations and missed notes as Ethan struggled to read the sheet music. Robert descended the grand staircase quietly, pausing at the entrance to the music room. Ethan sat at the Steinway grand piano, his body swaying slightly with the music, his face close to the sheet music, sometimes closing his eyes and continuing from memory when the notes became too difficult to discern. That was beautiful, Robert said when the piece concluded. Ethan startled slightly. I didn't hear you come in. I messed up the middle section. Your mother used to say that the soul of music lives in the spaces between perfect notes. It was rare for Robert to mention Sarah, the pain of her absence still acute after all these years. Ethan smiled, a flicker of surprise crossing his face at this unexpected connection to the mother he'd never known. Mrs. Henderson says I should start learning Braille music notation, just in case. The suggestion hit Robert like a physical blow. Who is Mrs. Henderson? The specialist the school brought in. She works with visually impaired students. I never authorized this. Robert's voice sharpened with anger and something else, fear. I asked the counselor about it, Ethan admitted. I thought I should be prepared. Robert moved to the piano, sitting beside his son on the bench. Listen to me, Ethan. We are not accepting this diagnosis as final. I'm flying in specialists from around the world. We're exploring every possible treatment option. Dad, Ethan said quietly, his young face showing a maturity beyond his years. Doctor, Chen said there isn't a cure. Medical science advances every day. What's impossible today becomes routine tomorrow. That's the entire foundation of Medivision. Robert placed his hands on Ethan's shoulders. I promise you we will find a way to stop this. Ethan nodded, but his eyes, already showing signs of the macular degeneration, held a wisdom that recognized the difference between determination and denial. The next morning, Robert received a call from Dr. Chen. Mr. Mitchell, I've been reviewing Ethan's latest test results. The progression rate is concerning. I'd like to discuss adaptation strategies and support systems that would help him prepare for... We're pursuing alternative treatments, Robert interrupted. I've scheduled consultations with specialists in Switzerland and Germany next week. A weighted pause followed. I understand your desire to explore all options. That's completely natural. But I'm concerned that focusing exclusively on finding a cure might delay important adaptive training that could help Ethan maintain his independence as his vision changes. Independence won't be necessary when we stop the progression, Robert insisted. Mr. Mitchell, Dr. Chen's voice was gentle but firm. I've dedicated my career to treating conditions like Ethan's. In my professional opinion, the most responsible approach combines pursuit of treatment with practical adaptation strategies. Ethan is at a critical developmental stage. Learning skills like mobility training, adaptive technology use, and yes, Braille, would empower him regardless of how his vision progresses. The suggestion felt like surrender to Robert. He ended the call with a terse promise to consider her recommendations. then immediately contacted his research team to expedite their investigation into experimental therapies. That afternoon, he received an unexpected visitor at Medivision headquarters. Dr. Eleanor Simmons, head of ophthalmology at Massachusetts General Hospital and a long-standing research partner with his company, arrived unannounced. "Eleanor," he greeted her with surprise. "I didn't realize we had a meeting scheduled." "We don't," she replied, her grey eyes direct behind stylish frames. "This is a personal visit. I heard about Ethan's diagnosis." Robert gestured her into his office, his face tightening. "News travels fast. The medical community is smaller than you might think, especially in specialized fields." She declined his offer of coffee. "Robert, I've known you for 15 years. I know how you operate. Identify a problem, throw resources at it until it's solved. That approach built this company, but it's not how you can help your son right now." "I don't need another lecture about acceptance," he said sharply. "This isn't about acceptance. It's about parallel strategies." She leaned forward. "Continue pursuing treatments by all means, but simultaneously give Ethan the tools he needs to thrive regardless of outcome. The Perkins School for the Blind has an exceptional program that doesn't require residential enrollment." "Absolutely not," Robert cut her off. "Ethan doesn't belong in a school for the blind. He's not blind." "Not yet," Eleanor said softly. "But preparing for that possibility isn't giving up, it's being strategic. Isn't that what you've built your career on?" "Strategic thinking?" After she left, Robert remained at his desk, staring at a framed photograph of Ethan as a toddler, sitting on his shoulders at a Red Sox game. The memory was vivid. Ethan's delighted laughter, his tiny hands gripping Robert's hair, the perfect blue of the summer sky. The thought that Ethan might someday be unable to see the green of Fenway Park or the expression on his father's face was unbearable. The Swiss specialist, when they finally met him the following week, offered an experimental regimen of antioxidants and specialized light therapy. The German clinic proposed a surgical intervention to implant retinal microchips. A research team in Tokyo suggested gene therapy, targeting the ABCA4 gene mutation responsible for Stargardt's disease. Robert pursued them all, chartering private jets to fly Ethan between specialists, reviewing research protocols until dawn, offering research grants to accelerate promising studies. He leveraged every connection, called in every favor, deployed his considerable fortune like a weapon against the encroaching darkness threatening his son. Yet despite these Herculean efforts, Ethan's vision continued to deteriorate. The central blind spot expanded, colors faded. Reading became increasingly difficult, even with magnification aids. One evening, Robert returned home to find Ethan sitting in the dark living room. "Why are you sitting here without lights?" he asked, reaching for the switch. "Sometimes it's easier without them," Ethan replied. "The contrast is better in dim light, and my eyes don't get as tired." Robert sank into the chair opposite his son. "The clinic in Tokyo called. The preliminary results from their gene therapy trials are promising. They've invited us to participate in the next phase." Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable in the shadows. "When do we leave?" "Next month, after they complete the current trial phase." Robert hesitated. "There's something else, Doctor. Thompson identified a researcher in Phoenix, developing an experimental neural implant that bypasses damaged retinal cells entirely. It's cutting-edge technology." "How experimental?" "Very, but the potential is enormous." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When was the last time you went to the office?" "I mean, really went to work?" The question caught Robert off guard. "I'm working remotely. The company is fine." "That's not what I meant." Ethan leaned forward. "You've put everything on hold. Your work, your life. You spend all day researching treatments and making calls. You barely sleep." "None of that matters," Robert said firmly. "Nothing is more important than finding a solution for you." "But what if there isn't one?" Ethan's voice was small but steady. "What if this is just how things are going to be?" "Don't talk like that." Robert's tone was sharper than he intended. "We will find a treatment. I don't care what it costs or how long it takes." "I'm not giving up," Ethan clarified. "I just think maybe we need to adjust our expectations. Mrs. Henderson showed me some really cool adaptive technologies today. There's this app that can identify objects and read text aloud, and special glasses that enhance contrast." Robert felt a surge of betrayal. "You're still meeting with her without telling me." "I asked the school counselor to arrange it." Ethan's voice grew firmer. "Dad, I'm scared too. But I need to learn how to live with this, not just hope for a miracle. The words hung between them, honest and painful. Robert saw in his son's face a resilience he hadn't allowed himself to recognize, a strength that reminded him acutely of Sarah. Later that night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Robert sat alone in his study. On his desk lay the business card Dr. Chen had given him weeks ago. Catherine Winters, Director of Adaptive Services, New England Center for Visual Rehabilitation. He turned the card over in his hands repeatedly, as if it were both salvation and surrender. Finally, he reached for his phone. The New England Center for Visual Rehabilitation occupied a renovated Victorian building in Cambridge, its brick facade softened by climbing ivy and window boxes filled with vibrant flowers. Robert parked his Tesla in the small lot, observing the modest surroundings with skepticism. After weeks of visiting state-of-the-art medical facilities around the world, this place seemed underwhelming, almost quaint. Inside, the reception area was bathed in natural light, with walls painted in warm tones and furniture arranged to create clear pathways. Robert noted the textured floor strips, high-contrast signage and acoustic elements designed to help with spatial orientation, subtle accommodations for the visually impaired that wouldn't have registered to him a few months ago. Mr. Mitchell, a woman in her 50s, approached, extending her hand. Catherine Winters, thank you for coming. Her handshake was firm, her gaze direct. Robert had expected someone more clinical, perhaps with the deferential manner most people adopted when meeting a man of his wealth and influence. Instead, Catherine Winters carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. Dr. Chen speaks highly of your program, Robert said, following her down a hallway where each door was marked with both traditional and braille signage. We take a comprehensive approach to visual rehabilitation, Catherine explained. Medical treatment is just one component. Equally important are psychological adaptation, skill development, and community integration. They passed a room where a group of teenagers was engaged in what appeared to be an art class, working with clay and textured materials. Isn't art therapy rather simplistic for something as complex as vision loss? Robert couldn't keep the skepticism from his voice. Catherine smiled, unperturbed. Art involves far more than visual perception. It engages spatial awareness, tactile sensitivity, and emotional expression, all critical faculties for someone adapting to changes in vision. She paused. Mr. Mitchell, may I speak frankly? I prefer it. Dr. Chen told me about your global search for treatments. That determination is admirable, and I encourage you to continue exploring medical interventions. But adaptation isn't surrender, it's strategic preparation. The words echoed what Eleanor had told him, but something about Catherine's manner, practical rather than sympathetic, made him more receptive. I'm not here to discuss acceptance, he said firmly. I'm exploring all avenues while continuing to pursue a cure. Fair enough. Catherine led him into her office, a space filled with books, adaptive technology samples, and a wall of photographs showing clients engaged in various activities: skiing, rock climbing, playing musical instruments. These are all visually impaired individuals? Robert asked, studying the images. Yes, many completely blind. She gestured to a particularly striking photo of a teenage girl playing violin on a stage. That's Lily Adams. She lost her vision at 9 from optic nerve damage after an accident. Now she's first chair in her youth orchestra. Robert's attention was caught by the genuine pride in Catherine's voice. How do you measure success here? What metrics do you use? Catherine seemed amused by his corporate approach. We track functional independence, academic achievement, and psychological well-being. But our true measure of success is when our clients stop defining themselves by what they've lost and start exploring what they can gain. She handed him a folder containing information about their programs. I suggest starting with an assessment. We can evaluate Ethan's current visual function and develop a personalized plan that complements his medical treatments. Robert accepted the folder, not yet committing. I'll consider it. As they walked back toward the entrance, a commotion near the reception area caught their attention. A teenage girl was kneeling beside a younger boy who appeared distressed, his hands covering his eyes. It's okay, Jason, the girl was saying, her voice gentle but assured. Remember what we practiced. When the light gets too intense, we use our breathing technique and visualization. Robert watched as she guided the boy through several deep breaths. speaking softly about imagining a dimmer switch for the brightness around them. Gradually, the boy's rigid posture relaxed. "That's it," she encouraged. "Now let's use your filter glasses. They're in your left pocket." The boy fumbled slightly but found the specialized sunglasses and put them on. His relief was immediate. "Better," he murmured. "Excellent work, Jason," the girl said, helping him to his feet. Only then did Robert notice the white cane folded and tucked into her back pocket. She was visually impaired herself. "Who is that?" Robert asked Catherine. "Lily Adams. The violinist I mentioned." Catherine's expression softened with evident affection. "She volunteers here 3 days a week, mentoring younger clients. She has an extraordinary gift for connecting with children struggling with vision loss." Robert observed the interaction with growing interest. The girl couldn't be more than 16, with long dark hair pulled back in a practical braid, and a face animated by expression despite her unseeing eyes. There was something compelling about her presence, a centered quality that stood in stark contrast to the frantic energy that had characterized his own recent existence. "How does she do that?" he asked, gesturing toward Jason, who was now smiling as Lily described something that had him laughing. "Do what?" "Connect with them. Help them through the panic." Catherine considered the question. "Lily understands something many sighted people never grasp. That vision is just one way of experiencing the world. She teaches our clients to activate their other senses, to find alternative pathways to information and experience." As they watched, Lily guided Jason to a tactile map of the building, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency over the raised surfaces. Her movements were confident, her spatial awareness precise despite her blindness. "She developed most of our sensory integration techniques," Catherine added. The administration was skeptical at first. She was only 14 when she proposed them, but the results were undeniable. Her methods have helped dozens of children maintain academic progress during vision transition. For the first time in weeks, Robert felt a flicker of something beyond desperate determination, genuine curiosity. "I'd like to observe one of her sessions." Catherine checked her watch. "She's leading a group session in 30 minutes. You're welcome to sit in, though we typically ask parents to watch from our observation room to avoid influencing the dynamic." Robert agreed, and after completing some preliminary paperwork, found himself in a small room with a large window overlooking a classroom. One-way glass allowed him to observe without being seen by the participants. Lily entered the classroom precisely at the scheduled time, moving with remarkable fluidity for someone who couldn't see. 5 children of various ages arranged themselves in a circle around her, some using canes, others with guide dogs, a few with no visible aids. "Today we're exploring texture as a way of seeing," Lily began, her voice clear and engaging. "Who remembers our discussion about creating mental maps through touch?" A young girl raised her hand, then quickly added, "My hand is up, Miss Lily." "Thank you for the verbal cue, Emma," Lily responded with a smile. "Tell us what you remember." "That our fingertips have more nerve endings than almost anywhere else on our bodies, so they can read information almost as fast as eyes." "Excellent." Lily opened a box and began distributing what appeared to be fabric squares. "Each of you has received a different texture. I want you to create a detailed description in your mind, not just rough or smooth, but the complete sensation. Then we'll practice translating that tactile information into visual imagery." Robert watched, fascinated, as Lily guided the children through exercises that clearly engaged multiple sensory pathways. She had them describe colors based on temperature associations, create spatial awareness through sound reflection, and build mental images through sequential touch exploration. One boy, about Ethan's age, was struggling with the exercise, his frustration evident. Lily moved to kneel beside him, taking his hands in hers. "Tyler, you're trying to see the texture with your eyes that aren't working well right now," she said gently. "Instead, let your fingers become your eyes. Close your visual eyes and open your tactile ones." She guided his hands over the fabric in a systematic pattern. "What do you feel first? Just the basic impression." "It's bumpy," the boy said hesitantly. "Good. Now explore those bumps. Are they regular or random, large or small?" "Regular, small bumps in rows." "Excellent. Now temperature. Does it feel cool or warm to your touch?" "Cool at first, then warmer." Step by step, Lily built a comprehensive sensory profile that clearly helped the boy form a mental image of the material. By the end of the exercise, he was smiling. "I can see it in my mind," he said with evident surprise. It's clearer than when I try to use my eyes. That's because you're learning to see with your whole brain, not just your visual cortex, Lily explained. Our brains are amazingly adaptable. They want to create complete pictures of the world, and they'll use whatever information we give them. Robert found himself leaning forward, hanging on her every word. There was something in her approach that resonated with his engineer's mind. She wasn't offering platitudes or emotional support, but practical, systematic methods for rewiring sensory processing. It was elegant, almost algorithmic, yet deeply humane. When the session ended, he remained in the observation room, processing what he'd witnessed. Catherine joined him after a few minutes. "Thoughts?" she asked. "She's remarkable," Robert admitted. "Her methodology is unlike anything the specialists have discussed." Lily approaches vision loss from a unique perspective. Where medical science focuses on fixing the eyes, she focuses on enhancing the brain's ability to create coherent perceptions from whatever sensory data is available. Catherine paused. "Would you like to meet her?" The question caught Robert off guard. He was accustomed to being the one who summoned others to meetings, not the one requesting an audience. Yet he found himself nodding. Catherine left and returned a few minutes later with Lily. Up close, Robert could see that her eyes, though sightless, were an unusual shade of grey-green with flecks of gold, striking even in their stillness. "Lily, this is Robert Mitchell. He observed your session today and was impressed with your techniques." "Mr. Mitchell," Lily acknowledged with a slight nod in his direction, her spatial orientation remarkably accurate. "I hope you found it informative." "Very much so," Robert replied, studying her with undisguised curiosity. "Your approach is innovative." "Necessity drives innovation," she replied with a hint of a smile. "When traditional methods fell short for me, I had to develop alternatives. Catherine mentioned you lost your vision at 9, yet you navigate the world with remarkable confidence." "I had excellent teachers," Lily said, "and I discovered that vision isn't limited to what we perceive through our eyes." There was something about her, a quiet assurance, a perceptiveness that seemed to extend beyond physical sight, that reminded Robert of Sarah. The realization was unsettling. "I have a son," he said abruptly. "Ethan. He's 12. Recently diagnosed with Stargardt's macular dystrophy." Lily's expression softened with genuine concern. "I'm familiar with Stargardt's. It presents unique challenges, especially with the progressive nature of the condition. We're pursuing various treatment options," Robert added quickly. "Specialists in Switzerland, experimental procedures." "Of course," Lily interrupted gently. "Medical intervention is crucial, but while you're fighting for his vision, he's likely struggling with the day-to-day reality of diminishing sight." The simple truth of this statement hit Robert with unexpected force. While he'd been focused on the future, on preventing blindness, Ethan was living with increasing visual limitations every day. "Would you be willing to work with him?" The question surprised even Robert himself. Lily tilted her head slightly, considering. "I'd need to meet him first. My approach isn't suitable for everyone. It requires openness to unconventional methods. He's a bright boy, curious, adaptable." Robert found himself almost pleading, another unfamiliar sensation. "It's not about intelligence," Lily clarified. "It's about readiness to explore alternative ways of experiencing the world. Some people cling to traditional visual processing even as it becomes less reliable. That creates frustration rather than adaptation." Catherine, who had been observing their exchange with interest, intervened. "Perhaps we could arrange an informal meeting." "No pressure, just an opportunity for Lily to meet Ethan and assess whether her methods might benefit him." Robert nodded, then verbalized his agreement when he remembered Lily couldn't see the gesture. "Yes, I'd appreciate that." As they finalized the arrangements, Robert found himself studying Lily more closely. There was something vaguely familiar about her features. Perhaps it was just the coincidental resemblance to Sarah that he'd noted earlier. "One last question," he said, as they prepared to leave. "Catherine mentioned you developed these techniques at 14. That's extraordinarily young to create such a sophisticated methodology." Lily smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her serious face. "I've always been told I have an old soul, but the truth is simpler. When you lose one way of experiencing the world, you become highly motivated to discover others." As Robert drove home, his mind was filled not with medical research or treatment protocols, but with the image of Lily guiding children through a different kind of seeing, one that transcended the limitations of damaged eyes and embrace the full sensory capacity of the human brain. For the first time since Ethan's diagnosis, he felt something new emerging alongside his determination to find a cure, a tentative openness to parallel possibilities. Ethan sat in the window seat of his bedroom, a book open but unread on his lap. Outside, autumn was painting Harvard Yard in brilliant hues of crimson and gold, but the colors appeared muted through his increasingly unreliable vision. He traced his fingers over the page, a habit he'd developed as the words became harder to discern. "Someone's here to see you," Robert announced from the doorway. Ethan looked up, squinting slightly to bring his father's face into focus. "Another doctor? No, something different today." Robert stepped aside, revealing a teenage girl with a long, dark braid and alert, unmoving eyes. "Hi, Ethan," she said, her voice warm and direct. "I'm Lily Adams." Ethan studied her with curiosity, immediately noticing the way she oriented her head towards sounds rather than visual cues. "You're blind," he observed. "Yes," she answered without hesitation, "since I was 9. Lily works at the rehabilitation center we discussed," Robert explained. "She has some unique approaches that might be helpful while we continue pursuing treatments." Ethan's expression reflected skepticism, but also intrigue. "What kind of approaches?" "That depends," Lily replied, stepping confidently into the room despite never having been there before. "Mind if I sit down?" "Sure." Ethan gestured to a chair, then quickly added, "There's an armchair to your right, about 4 steps forward." Lily smiled, appreciating his verbal direction. "Thank you." She navigated to the chair precisely, her movements fluid and assured. "I'll leave you two to talk," Robert said, his tone revealing his own uncertainty about this unconventional approach. He retreated, closing the door partially. Once he left, Lily turned her attention fully to Ethan. "So I hear you're dealing with Stargards." "Yeah. It sucks." "It does," she agreed, surprising him with her candor. No point pretending otherwise. Her bluntness caught Ethan off guard. Adults typically offered platitudes or forced optimism. "Everyone keeps telling me it's going to be okay." "People say that because they don't know what else to say." Lily shrugged. "The truth is more complicated. Some things will be hard. Some things will actually be better than before. Most things will just be different." "Better like what?" "Your other senses will become more acute. You'll notice sounds, scents, and textures that most people miss entirely. You'll develop an extraordinary memory. You'll become more present in each moment." She leaned forward. "But I'm not here to convince you that vision loss is some kind of gift. It's a genuine challenge. I'm here because I might be able to help you develop some tools to navigate that challenge." Ethan considered her words. "My dad's still convinced he can fix me. He's flying in specialists from everywhere." "That's what dads do," Lily said with a hint of a smile. "They try to fix things. And maybe he will find a treatment that helps." "I hope so. But in the meantime, you're dealing with vision changes right now, aren't you?" Ethan nodded, then remembered she couldn't see him. "Yes. It's getting harder to read. Colors look washed out. And there's this spot in the center of everything I look at, the central scotoma. It's characteristic of Stargardts." Lily's familiarity with his condition was reassuring. "How are you compensating so far?" "I hold books closer, use my phone's magnifier, sit at the front of class." He hesitated. "But it's getting worse pretty fast." "May I try something with you?" Lily asked, reaching into her bag. "What is it?" "A different way of seeing." She pulled out several fabric squares similar to those she'd used in her group session. "This is something I developed after losing my vision. It helps train your brain to create visual imagery from tactile information." She handed him a square of fabric. "Close your eyes." "But I can still see something with them open," Ethan protested. "Exactly. And right now your brain is prioritizing that incomplete visual information over other sensory data. We need to temporarily shut down that dominant pathway to strengthen the alternatives." She demonstrated by closing her own eyes. "Try it." Reluctantly, Ethan closed his eyes. "Now, explore the fabric with your fingertips," Lily instructed. "Not just a quick touch, really investigate it. Feel for patterns, textures, temperature." Ethan ran his fingers over the material. "It's smooth, cold at first, then warms up. There's a pattern, tiny raised dots in some kind of arrangement." "Good. Keep going. Are the dots regular or random?" "What's their spacing?" As Ethan continued to describe what his fingers discovered, Lily asked increasingly specific questions, guiding him to notice subtle details he would have overlooked. Gradually, something remarkable happened. An image began forming in his mind, more detailed than what his weakening eyes could have perceived. "I can see it," he said with surprise. "In my mind, I mean. It's like a constellation pattern, stars on dark blue velvet." "That's exactly what it is," Lily confirmed. "You're seeing with your brain, not just your eyes." They continued with several more fabrics, each exercise building Ethan's confidence in his ability to construct detailed mental images from touch alone. After about an hour, Lily shifted to a different activity, introducing what she called echolocation awareness. "This helps with spatial navigation," she explained, producing a small device that made clicking sounds. The human ear can detect incredibly subtle differences in how sound reflects off objects. With practice, you can learn to hear the dimensions of a room, the location of furniture, even approaching people. By the time Robert returned to check on them, Ethan was blindfolded, successfully navigating around his bedroom using the clicking device and his heightened awareness of sound reflection. "Dad," he called out the moment the door opened. "I knew it was you from the way the sound changed when you opened the door." Robert stared in astonishment at his son's animated expression, a stark contrast to the dejection that had characterized him in recent weeks. "We've been working on sensory substitution techniques," Lily explained, rising from her chair. "Ethan has a natural aptitude for it. It's like having superpowers," Ethan added, removing the blindfold. "Lily says blind people can develop abilities that sighted people never do because their brains reassign the visual cortex to enhance other senses." Robert studied his son's face, noting the genuine enthusiasm there. "That's impressive. Would you like to try something, Mr. Mitchell?" Lily asked unexpectedly. "Me? Yes. It might help you understand what Ethan is experiencing." She held out a blindfold. "Just for a few minutes." Robert hesitated, uncomfortable with the vulnerability the suggestion entailed, especially in front of his son. But Ethan's encouraging expression made refusal difficult. Awkwardly, he accepted the blindfold and put it on. Immediate darkness. Complete dependence. His heart rate accelerated slightly. "Now," Lily's voice came from his left, her tone calm and assured. "I'm going to hand you something. I want you to identify it using only touch." Cool metal pressed into his palm, something small and intricate. "Take your time," Lily instructed. "Explore it systematically. Build a mental image piece by piece." Robert's fingers moved carefully over the object, identifying gears, a winding mechanism, a face with raised indicators. "It's a pocket watch," he concluded. "Very good. Now, can you tell me anything specific about it?" Robert continued his exploration, his engineer's mind engaging with the challenge. "The case has an engraved pattern. Floral, I think. The winding crown is unusually large. The face has raised Roman numerals." "Excellent," Lily affirmed. "One more thing. There's an inscription on the back. Can your fingers read it?" Robert turned the watch over, his fingertips searching for engraved letters. He found them, tiny depressions that were almost imperceptible. "I can feel something, but I can't make out the words." "That's okay." "It took me months to develop that level of tactile sensitivity," Lily assured him. "The point is, your brain was creating detailed visual imagery based solely on touch. That's the same process Ethan is learning, to see without relying exclusively on his eyes." When Robert removed the blindfold, he looked at the pocket watch with new appreciation. The inscription he couldn't read with his fingers was clearly visible. "Time reveals what eyes cannot see." "That was enlightening," he admitted. "Lily's going to teach me how to read Braille," Ethan announced. "Not because I'll definitely need it, but because it's another skill that might be useful, like learning a secret code." Robert noticed how carefully Lily had reframed what could have been perceived as an admission of defeat into an opportunity for mastery, a subtle but crucial psychological shift. "Would it be possible for Lily to continue working with me?" Ethan asked, his expression hopeful. "Maybe a few times a week?" The request placed Robert in an unexpected position. He'd brought Lily here as an exploratory measure, not fully committed to the rehabilitative approach she represented. Yet seeing his son's renewed animation, his pride in acquiring new skills rather than dwelling on what he was losing, made the decision obvious. "If Lily is willing and it can be arranged with the center," he conceded. "Actually," Lily said, "I primarily work as a volunteer mentor. My schedule is fairly flexible. We'll compensate you appropriately for your time," Robert began, reaching automatically for his business mindset. That's not necessary, Lily interjected. The center has a scholarship program for clients like Ethan. His sessions would be covered under that. I don't require charity, Robert said stiffly. Lily turned toward him, her sightless eyes somehow still managing to convey intensity. It's not charity, Mr. Mitchell. The program is funded by grants and donations specifically for this purpose. If you'd like to contribute to the center separately, I'm sure Catherine would welcome that, but Ethan's participation shouldn't be contingent on financial arrangements. Her directness was refreshing, if somewhat discomforting to a man accustomed to deference. Very well, we can discuss the details later. Over the following weeks, Lily became a regular presence in the Mitchell household. 3 afternoons a week, she worked with Ethan on developing what she called his sensory vocabulary, techniques for gathering and interpreting non-visual information from the world around him. Robert often observed these sessions, fascinated by Lily's methods and by his son's rapid progress. She taught Ethan to identify objects by their sound signatures, to navigate using subtle air currents and ambient noise, to read facial expressions through touch, and to create richly detailed mental maps of his surroundings. One afternoon, Robert came home early to find them in the kitchen, surrounded by various ingredients and cooking implements. Cooking engages all the senses, Lily was explaining. It's perfect practice for integrated sensory processing. Ethan, blindfolded again, was carefully measuring spices. Cinnamon, he identified, holding a jar near his nose. And this one's cardamom. Good, Lily confirmed. Now what can you tell about the apples from their sound when you tap them? Ethan gently tapped 2 apples on the counter. This one sounds duller. Less crisp? Exactly. That indicates it's softer, probably a bit past its prime. Always trust your non-visual senses. They rarely mislead you if you've trained them properly. Robert watched from the doorway, struck by the methodical yet creative approach Lily brought to each lesson. She never dwelled on limitations, focusing instead on expanding possibilities. Under her guidance, Ethan was developing a new confidence, not just in managing his diminishing vision, but in approaching challenges with resourcefulness and adaptability. As the weeks passed, Robert noted subtle changes in his own perspective as well. The frantic pursuit of miracle cures gradually balanced with appreciation for Ethan's growing independence. While he continued to investigate promising treatments, consulting with researchers and specialists around the globe, he no longer viewed adaptation as surrender. One evening, after Lily had left following a particularly successful session where Ethan navigated the entire house blindfolded without a single collision, Robert found himself looking through old photographs in his study. He paused on an image of Sarah, struck anew by her vibrant presence even in a static photograph. "Dad?" Ethan stood in the doorway. "Can I ask you something about Mom?" Robert looked up, surprised. They rarely discussed Sarah. The pain of her absence had always made such conversations difficult. "Of course." Ethan entered, sitting beside him on the leather sofa. What color were her eyes? The question caught Robert off guard. "Blue," he answered. "A very unusual blue, almost violet in certain light." "I've been thinking," Ethan said slowly. "As my vision changes, I might forget what colors really look like. Could you describe Mom to me, not just what she looked like, but how she was? So I can keep her in my mind, even if I can't see her picture someday." The request pierced Robert's carefully maintained emotional barriers. He studied his son's face. Sarah's delicate features reflected there, now tinged with a vulnerability that made them even more precious. "She was," he began, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "She was like music, made visible. Everything about her had this sense of harmony and movement. Her laugh could fill a room. Her hands were always expressive. She talked with them when she got excited about something." As he continued, painting Sarah with words, creating an image that transcended the visual, Robert experienced an unexpected revelation. In his determination to find a medical solution for Ethan's condition, he had been focusing exclusively on saving his son's sight. But perhaps what Ethan needed most was to learn what Lily already knew, that there were many ways to see the world, to preserve its beauty and meaning, even as visual perception changed. When Lily arrived for their next session, Robert was waiting for her. "I'd like to discuss expanding your work with Ethan," he said, his tone reflecting a new resolve. "And I have a proposition regarding the center's sensory integration program." The transformation in the Mitchell household over the following months was remarkable. What had once been a sterile showcase of wealth, pristine and untouched, gradually evolved into a living laboratory of sensory exploration. The formal dining room now housed a variety of textured materials and acoustic instruments. The conservatory had been repurposed as a scent garden, filled with aromatic plants carefully labeled in both print and braille. Even the swimming pool had been enhanced with underwater speakers that created sound patterns Ethan could follow while swimming laps. Robert's proposition to Lily had been both simple and ambitious. He wanted to fund an expansion of her sensory integration techniques, first for Ethan, then potentially for other children with visual impairments. The center would remain the official sponsor, but Robert would provide resources far beyond what their modest budget allowed. "I don't understand why you're hesitating," Robert said one afternoon, as they sat in his study, reviewing the proposal he'd drafted. "This would help countless children like Ethan." Lily's expression was thoughtful, her fingers tracing the edge of the document she couldn't see. "I'm not opposed to expanding the program, Mr. Mitchell. I'm concerned about your motivations." "My motivations?" Robert's tone sharpened with surprise. Few people dared question his intentions, especially when he was offering substantial financial support. "Yes," Lily's voice remained calm. "Are you funding this because you believe in the approach, or because you're hedging your bets while still hoping for a miracle cure?" The directness of her question caught him off guard. After weeks of working together, he'd grown accustomed to Lily's perceptiveness, but her ability to cut through pretense still unsettled him. "Does it matter?" he countered. "The result is the same either way." "It matters to Ethan." She leaned forward. "He's making remarkable progress, but he's still seeking your approval. He needs to know that you value who he is becoming, not just who he was before his diagnosis." Robert stared at her, struck by the uncomfortable accuracy of her assessment. He had been careful to express pride in Ethan's accomplishments, but perhaps some part of him still treated their work with Lily as a temporary measure, a stopgap until medical science provided a solution. "You're right," he admitted after a long pause. "I've been compartmentalizing, but seeing Ethan these past weeks, his resilience, his adaptability, has changed my perspective. This program has value regardless of medical outcomes." Lily's expression softened. "That's all I needed to hear." She extended her hand toward him. "Partners, then." As they shook hands, Robert was struck again by her remarkable presence. Despite her youth and her disability, she carried herself with a centered assurance that many of his high-powered business associates lacked. There was something almost familiar about her, a quality he couldn't quite place but that resonated with him on a level that transcended their professional relationship. The next day, Robert arranged a meeting with Catherine Winters to discuss formalizing their partnership. The center would provide the framework and expertise, while Medivision would contribute funding, technology, and research support. "This is an extraordinary opportunity," Catherine said, reviewing the proposal. "With these resources, we could expand our reach significantly." "Lily's methods deserve wider application," Robert replied. "I've seen firsthand how effective they are." Catherine studied him with interest. "You know, when you first came here, I wasn't convinced you'd be open to our approach. You seemed firmly committed to a purely medical solution." "I still am," Robert clarified. "The research continues, but I've learned that adaptation and innovation can coexist. That's the foundation of good business, after all, pursuing multiple promising avenues simultaneously." As they finalized the details, Catherine mentioned that the center was planning a small recital featuring students from their music program. "Lily will be performing," she added. "She's been working with several of our younger clients on a piece that incorporates their sensory integration techniques. You and Ethan should come." The recital was held in a modest auditorium at a local community college. Robert, accustomed to attending symphonies at Boston's Grand Concert Hall, found himself in a folding chair, in a space that probably violated several fire codes. Yet the atmosphere was charged with an energy often missing from more prestigious venues. Ethan sat beside him, excitement evident in his posture. In the weeks since beginning work with Lily, his confidence had grown substantially. Though his vision continued to deteriorate, the central scotoma expanding, colors fading further, his functional independence had actually increased. He navigated familiar environments without assistance, had mastered several adaptive technologies, and recently returned to piano lessons with a teacher who specialized in teaching visually impaired musicians. The lights dimmed, and Catherine took the stage to welcome the audience. She introduced the first performers, a group of children of various ages, some with white canes, others with guide dogs, a few with the distinctive thick glasses associated with partial vision. And then Lily appeared, violin in hand. She wore a simple blue dress, her dark hair loose around her shoulders rather than in her usual practical braid. Something about her appearance struck Robert forcefully, a sense of déjà vu he couldn't explain. The performance was unlike anything Robert had experienced. Lily had created a piece that integrated music with tactile and spatial elements. The children moved around the stage in choreographed patterns, creating sound not just with traditional instruments, but with textured surfaces, resonant objects, and their own bodies. The audience was invited to close their eyes at certain points, experiencing the performance as the visually impaired performers did, through sound, vibration, and spatial awareness. When the final notes faded, the audience erupted in applause. Ethan was on his feet immediately, clapping with unrestrained enthusiasm. Robert joined him, moved by the beauty and innovation of what they'd witnessed. Afterward, at the small reception in the lobby, Ethan eagerly joined the young performers, engaged in animated conversation about their techniques. Robert stood apart, watching his son with a mixture of pride and wistfulness. The boy was thriving in ways he hadn't anticipated, finding community and purpose in this unexpected journey. "He's quite remarkable," Lily's voice came from beside him, startling him slightly. Her ability to approach silently and identify people without visual cues still impressed him. "Yes, he is," Robert agreed. "Thanks in large part to you. I just provided some tools. Ethan did the real work." She turned her face toward him, her sightless eyes somehow finding his with uncanny accuracy. "You did well too, you know. It's not easy for a parent to adapt to such a profound change in expectations." Her insight, as always, was disconcertingly accurate. "I'm still working on it," he admitted. "For someone who built his career on adapting to changing circumstances, I've been surprisingly resistant to this particular change." "It's different when it's your child," Lily said softly. "When it's someone you love." Something in her tone caught his attention, a hint of personal knowledge behind the observation. "You speak as if from experience." A shadow crossed her face briefly. "I've seen many parents struggle with their children's diagnoses. The grief process is complex." "That's not what I meant," Robert pressed, intrigued by her momentary vulnerability. "You seem to understand the parental perspective with unusual clarity for someone your age." Lily's posture shifted slightly, a subtle withdrawal. "I should check on the younger performers." "Excuse me." As she moved away, navigating the crowded reception with practiced ease, Robert was left with the distinct impression that she was avoiding his question. It wasn't the first time he'd sensed her reluctance to discuss her personal background. Beyond the basic information that she'd lost her vision at 9, she revealed little about her life before the center. The following week, during one of Ethan's sessions, Robert found himself alone in his study while Lily worked with his son in the newly outfitted sensory room. On impulse, he opened his laptop and typed "Lily Adams Blind Violinist" into a search engine. The results were sparse. A few mentions in local community papers about performances at the center. A brief profile in a newsletter for a blindness advocacy organization. Nothing about her background before her connection with the New England Center for Visual Rehabilitation. His curiosity piqued, Robert refined his search. Lily Adams Accident Vision Loss, Boston. Still nothing substantive. He tried variations, different date ranges, broader terms. Eventually, he found a small article from 8 years ago. "Local girl loses vision after medical complication." The piece was brief, merely noting that a 9-year-old girl had experienced complete vision loss following complications from a routine procedure. No names were mentioned, and the hospital had declined to comment, citing patient privacy. Robert sat back, frowning. The timing aligned with what Lily had shared about losing her vision at 9, but the article mentioned a medical complication, not an accident, as Catherine had indicated. The discrepancy was minor, but caught his attention. Robert had built his success partly on his ability to spot inconsistencies that others overlooked. He was about to close the laptop when another thought occurred to him. Opening a new search, he typed Amanda Carter, Boston. The name came from nowhere and everywhere, a half-remembered fragment that floated to the surface of his consciousness, unbidden. The search returned thousands of results, none immediately relevant. He refined it. Amanda Carter, Boston, Medivision. This time, the results included a staff directory from 15 years ago, archived on a professional networking site. There she was. Amanda Carter, Research Assistant, Neurological Applications Division. Robert stared at the screen, memories stirring. Amanda Carter. Of course, she had worked in his company's research division during its early expansion phase. Brilliant, dedicated, quietly determined. They had collaborated closely on several projects, their professional relationship eventually evolving into something more personal. But when he'd ended their brief affair, his focus on growing the company leaving no room for serious romantic entanglements, she had resigned and disappeared from his life entirely. That had been, Robert calculated quickly, 16 years ago. Around the time he met Sarah, who would become his wife and Ethan's mother, a cold sensation spread through his chest as pieces began aligning in his mind. Lily's age, the timing of Amanda's departure, the strange sense of familiarity he'd felt since meeting her. It couldn't be. And yet, he opened another search window, looking for more information about Amanda Carter, but found little. She had effectively vanished from professional circles after leaving Medivision. No publications, no conference presentations, no digital footprint that would be expected of someone with her credentials. The sound of laughter drew his attention. Ethan and Lily had finished their session and were coming down the hallway, their voices animated as they discussed some shared joke. Robert closed the laptop quickly, unsettled by the direction of his thoughts. As they entered his study, he observed Lily with new scrutiny, the shape of her face, the determined set of her jaw, the way she tilted her head when concentrating, all reminiscent of Amanda. "We've been working on echolocation techniques," Ethan announced excitedly. "Lily can identify the size and shape of a room just by making clicking sounds with her tongue. She's teaching me how to do it." "Impressive," Robert managed, his mind still racing. Lily seemed to sense his distraction. "Is everything all right, Mr. Mitchell?" "Fine," he replied too quickly. "Just preoccupied with some company matters." She nodded, but her expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "Ethan's making excellent progress. We were discussing the possibility of visiting the Museum of Science next week. They have a touch tour program that would be perfect for practicing his sensory discrimination skills." "That sounds wonderful," Robert said, making an effort to focus on the present moment. "I could join you if that wouldn't interfere with the lesson." "Not at all," Lily smiled. "It would actually be helpful to have another person's perspective." As they discussed the logistics, Robert continued his covert assessment. The more he looked, the more he saw potential connections, subtle mannerisms, intellectual patterns, even the shape of her hands, that echoed Amanda. After Lily left, promising to return the following afternoon, Robert sat alone in his study, contemplating his next steps. If his suspicions were correct, if Lily was indeed Amanda's daughter, the implications were profound. But he needed more information before confronting such a possibility. The museum visit provided an unexpected opportunity. As Ethan eagerly explored the tactile exhibits under Lily's guidance, Robert engaged the program coordinator in conversation. "Lily is remarkable with the children," he observed casually. "Has she been with the center long?" "About 6 years," the coordinator replied. "She came through their youth program first after losing her vision. Catherine recognized her potential immediately, said she'd never seen anyone adapt so quickly or develop such innovative techniques for sensory substitution." "Do you know anything about her background? Her family?" The coordinator hesitated. "Not much. She was in foster care for a while after her mother passed away. I believe Catherine eventually became her legal guardian. She's quite private about her personal history." Foster care. Another piece falling into place. If Amanda had indeed been raising a daughter alone, what would have happened to the child if something had happened to her? Later that afternoon, as they prepared to leave the museum, Robert noticed Lily reach into her bag for her folded cane. Her sleeve pulled back slightly, revealing a small birthmark on her wrist, a distinctive crescent shape. Robert froze, his breath catching. Amanda had had an identical mark. The coincidence was too specific to dismiss. The timing, the physical similarities, the birthmark, all pointed to a connection he could no longer ignore. If Lily was Amanda's daughter, born after she left Medivision 16 years ago, then the possibility that had been forming in his mind crystallized into a near certainty. Lily Adams could be his daughter. The realization struck him with physical force, causing him to steady himself against a nearby wall. Ethan, absorbed in describing a final exhibit to Lily, didn't notice his father's reaction. "Mr. Mitchell," Lily called, her head turning in his direction. "Are you ready to go?" "Yes," he managed, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. "I'm ready." But he wasn't ready. Not for the implications of what he'd discovered, nor for the decisions that now lay before him. As they walked toward the exit, Robert watched the easy rapport between Ethan and Lily with new eyes, seeing not just a mentor and student, but potentially siblings, half-siblings who had found each other through the cruelest and most beautiful of coincidences. The question that now consumed him was not whether to pursue this truth, but how, and what the revelation would mean for all of them. The autumn rain tapped against the windows of Robert's office, creating a rhythmic background to his tumultuous thoughts. 3 days had passed since the museum visit, 3 days of careful observation and discreet investigation that had only strengthened his suspicions. He'd barely slept, his mind constantly returning to the implications of what he'd discovered. If Lily was indeed his daughter, a child he'd never known existed, what responsibility did he bear? What right did he have to disrupt her life with this revelation? And how would Ethan react to learning he had a half-sister? The intercom on his desk buzzed. "Mr. Mitchell, Catherine Winters is here to see you." Robert straightened, composing himself. He'd called this meeting under the pretense of discussing the expanded sensory program, but his true purpose was far more personal. "Send her in." Catherine entered, her professional demeanor tinged with curiosity. They'd already finalized most details of their partnership, making this hastily scheduled meeting unusual. "Robert," she greeted him, accepting his invitation to sit. "You mentioned some new considerations for our program?" He nodded, choosing his words carefully. "Before we proceed further, there are some background matters I need to clarify. About Lily." Catherine's expression shifted subtly, a wariness entering her eyes. "What about her? I've noticed certain patterns that suggest a possible connection to someone I once knew. A former employee named Amanda Carter." The name landed between them like a stone dropping into still water. Catherine's face revealed nothing, but her hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the arms of her chair. "Why do you ask?" Her voice was neutral, but Robert had negotiated enough high-stakes business deals to recognize controlled tension. "Amanda worked for me 16 years ago. We were close briefly. She left suddenly without explanation." He leaned forward. "Lily would have been born around that time." Catherine was silent for a long moment, her gaze steady on his face. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured. "What exactly are you asking, Robert? Is Lily Amanda Carter's daughter?" Another weighted pause. "Yes." The simple confirmation sent a wave of emotion through Robert. Vindication, confusion, a strange sense of loss for all the years he hadn't known. "And is she mine?" The question emerged more vulnerable than he'd intended. Catherine sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of long-held secrets. "I can't answer that with certainty. Amanda never explicitly named Lily's father. But the timing would align with her employment at Medivision." "When did Amanda pass away?" Robert asked, his throat tightening. 7 years ago, complications from an undiagnosed heart condition." Catherine's expression softened with remembered grief. She'd been raising Lily alone, working multiple jobs to make ends meet. They were living in Dorchester, in a small apartment above the music school where Amanda taught piano lessons. Robert absorbed this information with growing dismay. While he'd been building his empire, living in luxury, Amanda had been struggling to raise a child, possibly his child, in poverty. What happened to Lily afterward? She spent about a year in foster care. I met her when she came to the center after losing her vision, a complication from a routine procedure that went wrong. Her case was difficult. Foster placements for older children with disabilities are challenging to secure. Catherine's voice wavered slightly. I'd known Amanda professionally. We'd collaborated on community music programs. When I learned Lily was in the system, I applied to become her guardian. The pieces continued falling into place, creating a picture that filled Robert with equal parts clarity and regret. "Does Lily know about me?" "Not specifically. Amanda told her very little about her father, only that he had been unavailable for a family life." Catherine regarded him steadily. "May I ask what you intend to do with this information?" It was the question he'd been wrestling with since his suspicions first formed. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I believe Lily has a right to know the truth, and Ethan deserves to know if he has a sister." I agree that transparency is important, Catherine said carefully, but the timing and approach matter greatly. Lily has experienced significant loss and upheaval in her young life. Her stability is precious. I understand that, Robert's voice softened. I have no intention of disrupting her life, but if she is my daughter, I want to acknowledge that, to take responsibility in whatever way is appropriate. Catherine studied him as if assessing his sincerity. Would you be open to genetic testing? It would provide certainty before any discussions take place. Yes, Robert agreed immediately. But how do we approach Lily about this? Let me speak with her first, Catherine suggested. She trusts me. I can introduce the possibility without overwhelming her. They agreed on a plan. Catherine would have a preliminary conversation with Lily, explaining that someone from her mother's past had come forward with information about her potential parentage. If Lily was receptive, they would proceed with testing to confirm. 3 days later, Robert received a text from Catherine. Lily wants to meet. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. at the center. The message was brief but significant. Lily was willing to engage with the possibility, a first step into uncertain territory for all of them. The following afternoon, Robert arrived at the center 15 minutes early, his usual confident stride replaced by uncharacteristic hesitation. Catherine met him in the lobby, leading him to a small conference room rather than her office. "She'll be here soon," Catherine said. "She wanted some time to process our conversation before meeting with you." "How did she react?" Robert asked, unable to mask his concern. With remarkable composure, as she does most things. She had questions, of course. "About Amanda's time at Medivision, about your relationship." Catherine's expression was both protective and compassionate. She's approached this the same way she approaches everything, methodically, thoughtfully, without rushing to judgment. The door opened and Lily entered. She navigated the room with her usual confidence, her cane folded and tucked away once she'd established the dimensions of the space. She wore a simple blue sweater that reminded Robert again of Amanda's preference for that color. "Mr. Mitchell," she acknowledged, taking a seat across from him. "Lily." He studied her face, seeing now what should have been obvious from the beginning, the subtle echoes of his own features blended with Amanda's. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. Catherine explained your suspicions," she said directly, "about you and my mother." "Yes?" Robert hesitated, then continued with uncharacteristic uncertainty. "I want to be clear that I had no knowledge of the possibility that Amanda had a child. Had I known, what would you have done?" Lily interrupted, her voice calm but pointed. 16 years ago, when you were building your company, when your priorities were clearly established." The question caught him off guard with its incisiveness. "I don't know," he admitted honestly. "I can't rewrite the past or claim I would have made different choices then, but I can tell you what I would do now, which is to acknowledge my responsibility and offer support in whatever form you might want it." Lily nodded, absorbing his words. Catherine mentioned genetic testing. "Only if you're comfortable with it," Robert assured her. "It would provide certainty, but it's entirely your decision." "I'd like to proceed with testing," Lily said after a moment's consideration. "Not because I need financial support, Catherine has provided everything I need, but because I believe in facing truth, however complicated." Her maturity continued to impress him. At 16, she displayed a centeredness that many adults never achieved. "There's something else we should discuss," Robert said carefully. "If the testing confirms what I suspect, it would mean you and Ethan are half-siblings." For the first time, Lily's composed expression faltered slightly. "I've thought about that," she admitted. "It's a significant consideration." "He's grown very attached to you," Robert observed. "He looks forward to your sessions more than anything else in his week." "I've grown fond of him too," Lily said softly. "He reminds me of myself at that age, curious, adaptable, resilient in the face of challenge." They discussed practical matters then, how the testing would proceed, the timeline for results, the agreement to maintain their current working relationship while awaiting confirmation. As the meeting concluded, Lily hesitated at the door. "Mr. Mitchell, if the results confirm your suspicions, what happens then? What are your expectations?" The question was loaded with unspoken concerns about autonomy, about the future, about the complex relationship that might develop between them. "I have no predetermined expectations," Robert answered truthfully. "This would be uncharted territory for all of us. My only hope would be for openness and mutual respect as we navigate it together." Lily nodded, seemingly satisfied with his response. "I appreciate your honesty. After she left, Robert remained in the conference room with Catherine, the weight of potential change heavy in the air between them. "She's extraordinary," he said finally, "regardless of biology." "Yes, she is," Catherine agreed, "but she's also more vulnerable than she lets on. She's built careful structures around her life, routines, boundaries, systems that help her navigate her world. Any significant change threatens those structures." "I understand." Robert's voice was solemn. "Whatever the results, my priority will be her well-being, not my own agenda." The testing process was simple. Cheek swabs collected and sent to a discreet private laboratory that promised results within 10 days. During that waiting period, life continued its outward rhythms. Lily's sessions with Ethan proceeded as usual, their rapport deepening as they explored increasingly sophisticated sensory techniques. Robert observed their interactions with new awareness, noting the subtle similarities in their analytical approaches, their shared intuitive grasp of spatial concepts, their mutual dry humor that emerged in unexpected moments. Whether through genetics or coincidence, they complemented each other in ways that seemed almost designed. 9 days after the samples were submitted, Robert received a call from the laboratory. The results were conclusive, a 99.9% probability of paternity. Lily Adams was indeed his biological daughter. Though he had expected this outcome, the confirmation still struck him with surprising force. He sat in his office for a long time afterward, staring at the formal report, processing the reality that his family was larger and more complex than he had known just months ago. He called Catherine first, as they had agreed. "The results are positive," he said simply. "I'll speak with Lily," she replied. "She's been preparing herself for this possibility." "And Ethan?" Robert asked. "When and how do we tell him?" "That depends partly on Lily's wishes. This affects her relationship with him too." They arranged to meet the following afternoon, Robert, Catherine, and Lily, to discuss next steps. But fate had other plans. That evening, as Robert was reviewing documents in his study, Ethan appeared in the doorway, his expression troubled. "Dad, can I ask you something important?" Robert set aside his work immediately. "Of course, what is it?" Ethan entered slowly, settling into the chair across from his father. His vision had deteriorated further in recent weeks, requiring him to navigate more carefully, but his adaptive skills had developed impressively under Lily's guidance. "It's about Lily," he began, his voice uncertain. "I heard you on the phone earlier, something about test results being positive." Robert stared at his son, momentarily speechless. He hadn't realized Ethan was within earshot during that brief conversation. "I wasn't eavesdropping," Ethan added quickly. "Not on purpose, but since my vision started changing, my hearing has gotten really sensitive. Lily says that's normal. Sensory compensation." "It's all right," Robert assured him. "I'm not upset, but I'm surprised you connected that conversation to Lily." Ethan's expression grew more determined. "I've noticed things, the way you watch her sometimes, like you're trying to figure something out. And last week, when you thought I was in my room, I heard you and Catherine talking about when to tell him and family implications." Robert felt a mixture of pride at his son's perceptiveness and regret at having underestimated it. "You've put the pieces together, haven't you?" "Is Lily sick?" Ethan asked, his voice suddenly small with worry. "Is that what the test was for? Because if she needs help, we could—" "No," Robert interrupted gently, surprised by the direction of Ethan's concern. "Lily isn't sick. The test was a paternity test." Ethan's brow furrowed in confusion. "A paternity test? But why would you—" He stopped abruptly, his eyes widening as understanding dawned. "You think you're her father?" The directness of the question demanded equal honesty. "The test confirmed it. Lily is my biological daughter." Ethan sat perfectly still, processing this revelation. "So she's my sister?" "Half-sister, yes." Robert watched his son carefully, trying to gauge his reaction. "Does she know?" "She knows about the test. Catherine is telling her the results today." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "That's why she seemed familiar somehow. Even though I couldn't see her clearly, we're connected." The simple acceptance in his voice moved Robert deeply. "You're not upset by this news?" "Why would I be upset?" Ethan seemed genuinely puzzled. "I've always wanted a sibling, and Lily is— She's amazing, Dad. She's smart and kind, and she never treats me like I'm broken." Robert felt a tightness in his chest at his son's words, a mixture of relief and something more profound that he couldn't immediately identify. There's more to the story, he said carefully, about Lily's mother and why I didn't know about Lily until now. Tell me, Ethan said, settling more comfortably in his chair, ready to listen. So Robert did, explaining in age-appropriate terms his brief relationship with Amanda, her departure from the company, and his recent discovery of the connection. He spoke of Amanda's struggle as a single mother, her premature passing, and Lily's subsequent challenges with foster care and vision loss. Throughout the explanation, Ethan listened intently, asking occasional clarifying questions that reflected a maturity beyond his 12 years. So Lily grew up without you, and without knowing who her father was, he summarized, when Robert finished. That must have been really hard for her. The compassion in his son's voice touched Robert deeply. Yes, I believe it was. What happens now? Ethan asked. Will she come live with us? That's not a simple question, Robert replied honestly. Lily has a life with Catherine, who has been her guardian for years. She's 16, almost an adult herself. Any changes would need to be her choice based on what's best for her. Ethan nodded, absorbing this perspective. But we can be a family somehow, right? Even if we don't all live together? I hope so, Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. That would be my wish. Later that night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Robert received a text message from an unfamiliar number. It's Lily. Catherine shared the results. Could we meet tomorrow, just the two of us? The request was unexpected but welcome. Of course, he replied. Whenever and wherever you prefer. The public garden by the Swan Boats, 10 a.m. The choice of venue surprised him. A public space rather than the privacy of his home or the center. Perhaps she wanted neutral territory for what would inevitably be a complex conversation. The next morning dawned clear and cool, the garden awash in autumn colors. Robert arrived early, finding a bench near the lagoon where the swan boats glided peacefully through the water. He watched families pass by, parents guiding children, siblings laughing together, moments of ordinary connection that suddenly seemed extraordinarily precious. Lily appeared precisely at 10, navigating the familiar paths of the garden with confidence. Robert stood as she approached, struck anew by the reality that this remarkable young woman was his daughter. Good morning, she greeted him, her cane identifying the bench where he stood. Thank you for meeting me. Thank you for suggesting it, he replied, sitting beside her. For a moment, they sat in silence. The ambient sounds of the garden, children's laughter, birds calling, the gentle splash of water, creating a peaceful backdrop for their momentous conversation. The test results are conclusive, Lily said finally, though I've suspected since Catherine first explained your questions. There were always gaps in what my mother told me about my father. Logical inconsistencies that make more sense now. I wish I had known, Robert said softly. Not to rewrite history, but simply to acknowledge the truth. Lily turned toward him, her sightless eyes somehow finding his face. I've been thinking about what this means. For me, for you, for Ethan. It's complex. Yes, Robert agreed. And I want you to know that I make no claims or demands based on biology alone. Our relationship, whatever form it takes, should develop naturally, at a pace that feels right to you. I appreciate that. Lily's voice was measured, thoughtful. I spoke with Ethan this morning. He called me before I left for our meeting. This surprised Robert. He didn't mention he was going to call you. He was excited, Lily said, a small smile touching her lips. Said he couldn't wait to officially call me his sister. He has this whole plan for showing me his favorite music and books, things he wants to share now that we're family. The image of Ethan's enthusiasm warmed Robert's heart. He's taking the news better than I could have hoped. Children often do, Lily observed. They haven't yet learned to make situations more complicated than they need to be. The wisdom in her statement struck Robert forcefully. Throughout this journey, from Ethan's diagnosis through the discovery of Lily's identity, he had approached each development as a problem to be solved, a challenge to be managed. Perhaps there was something to be learned from his children's more straightforward acceptance. What do you want, Lily? He asked directly. Not what you think is expected or appropriate, but what you truly want from this situation. She considered the question carefully, her face turned toward the sun filtering through the autumn leaves. I want to know my brother better, she said finally, to build a real relationship with him that goes beyond mentor and student. And I want, she hesitated, vulnerability showing through her composed exterior. I want to understand who I am more fully, where I come from, the parts of myself that might make more sense in the context of knowing you. Her honesty invited his own. I want to know you, Robert said simply. Not just as Ethan's remarkable teacher or as a biological fact, but as yourself, as Lily. I've missed 16 years of your life. I can't reclaim that time, but I'd like to be present for whatever you're willing to share going forward. As they continued talking, the formal distance between them gradually softened. Robert shared stories of his own childhood, his early struggles building Medivision, memories of Amanda that Lily had never heard. Lily spoke of her mother's dedication to music education, of navigating the foster care system, of finding her purpose in helping others through their own visual transitions. By the time they parted, something had shifted. Not a complete transformation, but the beginning of a bridge across the chasm of years and circumstances that had separated them. "I should go," Lily said eventually, checking the time on her specialized watch. "I have a session at the center this afternoon." As she stood to leave, Robert asked the question that had been forming throughout their conversation. "Would you be willing to join us for dinner sometime, you and Catherine? Nothing formal, just family getting to know each other better." Lily considered the invitation, her head tilted in that characteristic way that Robert now recognized as a gesture she'd inherited from him. "I'd like that," she said finally. "And I think Catherine would too." As he watched her walk away, navigating the garden paths with the assured independence she'd cultivated through necessity and determination, Robert felt an unfamiliar emotion expanding in his chest, not the driven ambition that had fueled his career or the protective concern that characterized his relationship with Ethan, but something more complex and tender. Something that might, with time and patience, grow into the love of a father for a daughter he was only beginning to know. Spring arrived in Boston with a gentle persistence, coaxing color and life from the winter-hardened landscape. 6 months had passed since the revelation that had transformed the Mitchell family, months of careful navigation through unfamiliar emotional territory, of building bridges across years of separation. The Mitchell townhouse, once a showcase of untouchable elegance, had evolved into a vibrant family home. The formal dining room now regularly hosted Friday night dinners where Robert, Ethan, Lily, and Catherine gathered to share meals and stories. The pristine white walls had given way to textured surfaces in warm colors that provided both visual and tactile interest. The sound system had been reconfigured to create subtle acoustic wayfinding cues throughout the house. On this particular Saturday morning, the kitchen hummed with activity as Lily guided Ethan through making breakfast, a ritual they had established during their weekend visits. "Careful with the temperature," Lily advised, her head tilted toward the sound of sizzling butter. "Listen for the change in pitch when it's ready for the batter." Ethan, his vision now significantly diminished, but his other senses finely tuned, nodded. "I hear it. It's getting quieter, less crackly." "Perfect. Now ladle the batter in slowly, about 3 inches across." Robert watched from the doorway, coffee in hand, marveling at the synchronized movements of his children. Ethan's Stargardts had progressed as predicted, his central vision now severely compromised, with only peripheral awareness remaining. Yet his functional independence had actually increased over the past months, thanks largely to Lily's guidance and his own determination. The formal sensory integration program they had established at the center was thriving, with 15 children now participating regularly. But the most profound integration had happened within their family, the careful blending of separate lives into something new and unexpectedly harmonious. "Dad, stop lurking and make yourself useful," Ethan called out, having detected his father's presence without turning. "The strawberries need washing." Robert chuckled, entering the kitchen. "I see your spatial awareness training is coming along nicely." "Lily says I'm getting almost as good as she is," Ethan replied with evident pride. "Yesterday I navigated the entire center without my cane, just using echo techniques." "He's a natural," Lily confirmed, measuring coffee grounds with practiced precision. "Better than I was at his age." As Robert washed the strawberries, he found himself reflecting on the transformation of the past months. The frantic pursuit of miracle cures had gradually given way to a more balanced approach, continuing to investigate promising medical developments while simultaneously embracing adaptation and innovation. Medivision had launched a new research division dedicated to sensory substitution technologies, inspired by Lily's methodologies, but enhanced with cutting-edge engineering. The first prototype, a device that translated visual information into tactile sensations through a specialized wristband, was showing promising results in preliminary testing. Catherine called this morning, Lily mentioned, transferring perfectly golden pancakes to a warming plate. The foundation approved our expansion proposal. We can start renovations on the new space next month. The foundation she referred to was the Mitchell Family Foundation, established 4 months earlier to support research and programs for children with visual impairments. Its first major project was the expansion of the New England Center for Visual Rehabilitation, transforming it from a modest community resource into a comprehensive facility integrating medical research, adaptive training, and family support services. "That's excellent news," Robert replied, arranging the washed berries in a bowl. The architectural plans looked promising. "I particularly liked the multi-sensory garden concept." "It was Ethan's idea," Lily reminded him, a note of pride in her voice. "His design for interactive sound sculptures was what convinced the board." Ethan grinned, flipping another pancake with surprising dexterity. "I just thought about what would have helped me most when I was first diagnosed. Not just practical adaptation stuff, but something beautiful that works differently than visual art." As they settled around the kitchen island to enjoy their breakfast, Robert observed the easy interaction between his children, the inside jokes, the gentle teasing, the unconscious mirroring of gestures that seemed to transcend their different upbringings. The genetic connection that had been confirmed by science had blossomed into a genuine emotional bond that continued to deepen. "I almost forgot," Lily said, reaching into her bag. "I brought something to show you both. Well, not show exactly, but share." She produced what appeared to be a small electronic device, about the size of a cell phone but thicker, with a textured surface and several distinctive buttons. "What is it?" Ethan asked, his fingers exploring the object Lily placed in his hands. "It's a prototype of the sensory translation device Dad's company has been developing. Catherine and I have been consulting on the user interface." Lily's expression was animated. "The engineers incorporated our feedback about creating a more intuitive, tactile experience." Robert examined the device with interest. "This looks more advanced than the version I saw last month." "They've refined the haptic feedback system," Lily explained. "It now creates distinctive patterns for different visual elements, textures for objects, rhythmic pulses for movement, intensity variations for color and contrast." Ethan activated the device, running his fingers over the responsive surface as it processed visual information from its built-in camera. His face lit up with wonder. "I can feel the difference between you and Dad. Your patterns are totally distinct." "That's the facial recognition algorithm," Lily confirmed. "It's still being refined, but it can already distinguish between individuals and translate their features into unique tactile signatures." As they explored the capabilities of the prototype, Robert felt a profound sense of coming full circle. What had begun as a desperate search for a cure had evolved into something equally valuable, innovation that might help not just Ethan, but countless others navigating similar challenges. After breakfast, they prepared for the day's main event, the inaugural open house at the Sensory Integration Center they had established in a renovated brownstone near Boston Common. The location was significant, centrally accessible yet removed from the clinical atmosphere of hospitals or research facilities. It was designed to feel like a welcoming community space rather than a medical institution. "Nervous?" Robert asked Lily as they gathered their things to leave. She smiled, adjusting her violin case strap over her shoulder. "A little. We've put so much into this program. I want it to reach the people who need it most." "It will," Ethan assured her confidently. "You've created something amazing, Lily. Something that would have changed everything for me if it had existed when I was first diagnosed." His simple acknowledgement of what might have been, the easier path they could have traveled with earlier intervention, hung in the air between them for a moment. Then Lily reached out, finding her brother's shoulder with unerring accuracy. "We got there eventually," she said softly. "That's what matters." The center was already buzzing with activity when they arrived. Catherine greeted them at the entrance, clipboard in hand, looking both professional and quietly pleased with the turnout. "We have 15 families registered for tours, plus representatives from 3 school districts and the Children's Hospital Adaptive Services Department," she reported. "And the media arrived early. They're setting up in the main activity room for the demonstration." Robert had leveraged his connections to ensure media coverage of the opening, not for personal recognition, but to spread awareness of the resources now available. The Boston Globe had agreed to run a feature on innovative approaches to visual rehabilitation, highlighting the center's unique methodology. As Lily and Ethan moved through the space, greeting visitors and demonstrating techniques, Robert observed with quiet pride how naturally they had assumed leadership roles in the project. Ethan, despite his young age, spoke with remarkable clarity about his own journey, explaining to curious parents how sensory integration had transformed his experience of vision loss from one of deficit to one of adaptation. Lily, meanwhile, moved with practiced confidence between groups, alternating between demonstrating specific techniques and addressing broader questions about the program's philosophy. Her ability to connect with both children and adults, to translate complex neurological concepts into accessible language, reflected both her intellectual gifts and her hard-won personal experience. The formal presentation began at noon, with Catherine welcoming the assembled guests and explaining the center's mission. Robert spoke briefly about the Foundation's commitment to supporting innovative approaches to visual challenges, deliberately keeping his role minimal. Today was about the program itself, not the wealthy benefactor behind it. Then came the highlight of the event, a demonstration by Lily and several of her young students, including Ethan. They had prepared a multi-sensory performance that showcased how music, movement, and tactile awareness could create a rich experiential landscape accessible to all, regardless of visual ability. Lily began with a violin solo, the pure notes filling the space with haunting beauty. Gradually, the children joined in, some with simple percussion instruments, others creating soundscapes with textured materials. Ethan, seated at a keyboard, added harmonic structures that complemented his sister's melody. What made the performance truly remarkable was its interactive nature. The audience was invited to close their eyes, to experience the piece as the performers did, through sound, vibration, and spatial awareness. Staff members moved through the room with scented cloths and textured objects, adding olfactory and tactile dimensions to the experience. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of profound silence before the room erupted in applause. Many audience members appeared visibly moved, including several ophthalmologists who had initially been skeptical of approaches that focused on adaptation rather than treatment. "That was extraordinary," commented Dr. Eleanor Simmons, wiping away a tear. "I've been treating visual impairments for 30 years, but I've never experienced anything like this." It's opened my eyes, if you'll forgive the irony. As the formal program concluded and guests began touring the facility's various rooms, Robert found himself approached by a journalist from the Globe. "Mr. Mitchell, this center represents a significant departure from traditional medical approaches to visual impairment," she observed. "What inspired this direction, especially given your company's focus on diagnostic technology?" Robert considered the question, his gaze finding Ethan and Lily across the room, heads bent together as they demonstrated a tactile mapping technique to an interested family. "I learned something important from my children," he answered thoughtfully. "That vision isn't limited to what we perceive through our eyes. It's about how our brains construct meaning from all available sensory information. Medical science will continue pursuing treatments and cures, as it should. But in the meantime, there are remarkable pathways to rich, meaningful experiences that don't depend on conventional sight." "Your children," the journalist repeated, her expression curious. "Both Ethan and Lily Adams." The question touched on the family narrative they had carefully constructed for public consumption, acknowledging Lily as Robert's daughter while preserving her privacy regarding the circumstances of their late connection. "Yes," Robert confirmed simply. "They've been my greatest teachers in this journey." Later, as the event wound down and staff began the cleanup process, Robert found Lily sitting alone in the sound garden, a specially designed space where plants, water features, and wind-activated elements created an ever-changing acoustic environment. "May I join you?" he asked, announcing his presence. Lily smiled, patting the bench beside her. "I was just taking a moment to process everything. It went even better than I hoped." "It was remarkable," Robert agreed, sitting beside her. "You should be very proud." "I keep thinking about my mother," Lily admitted, her voice softening. "She always believed in making beauty accessible to everyone, regardless of circumstances. Her piano students included children with all kinds of challenges, learning differences, physical disabilities, economic hardships. She found ways to meet each of them where they were." Robert felt the familiar pang that accompanied mentions of Amanda, regret for what might have been, gratitude for the extraordinary daughter she had raised, despite difficult circumstances. "She would be immensely proud of you," he said sincerely. As am I. Lily turned toward him, her expression thoughtful. You know, when Catherine first told me about your questions, about the possibility that you might be my father, I was resistant. I'd constructed a narrative about my unknown father that helped me make sense of his absence. The reality of you disrupted that narrative. I understand, Robert said quietly. You had every right to maintain your distance. But then I met Ethan, Lily continued, and something unexpected happened. In helping him navigate his changing perception, I found myself reconsidering my own. Just as I taught him to see with more than his eyes, I began to see you with more than my preconceptions. The insight struck Robert forcefully, this remarkable capacity for growth and reconsideration that both his children possessed, a flexibility of mind that he had often lacked in his driven pursuit of singular goals. I'm grateful for your openness, he said, for the chance to know you, even if it came later than it should have. They sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the gentle sounds of the garden, water trickling over stones, bamboo chimes moving in the breeze, the rustle of leaves catching the afternoon light. Though Lily couldn't see this play of elements, her expression reflected deep appreciation of the sensory richness surrounding them. Dad, Ethan's voice called from the garden entrance. Catherine says we should head out soon if we're going to make our dinner reservation. We'll be right there, Robert replied, standing and offering his arm to Lily in a gesture that had become natural over the months, not because she needed physical guidance, but as a simple expression of connection. As they walked together toward the exit, passing through the center that represented their shared vision, Robert reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. What had begun as a desperate search for a medical miracle had evolved into something far more profound, a redefining of family, of ability, of what it meant to truly see the world and each other. The Mitchell family that emerged from the center that afternoon bore little resemblance to the isolated figures they had been a year earlier. Robert, once defined by control and achievement, had discovered the liberation of shared vulnerability. Ethan, initially devastated by his diagnosis, had found strength and identity beyond visual perception. And Lily, who had entered their lives as a teacher, had found the family connection she had never expected to claim. Together, they stepped into the spring afternoon, navigating not by sight alone, but by the deeper awareness they had cultivated, of sound and texture, of presence and absence, of the invisible bonds that connected them to each other and to the world beyond what eyes could see. Catherine joined them on the sidewalk, locking the center door behind her. "Shall we celebrate?" she suggested, her expression warm with satisfaction at the day's success. "Absolutely," Robert agreed, glancing at his children, at Ethan's confident stride despite his limited vision, at Lily's serene presence that had transformed all their lives. "We have much to celebrate." As they walked toward the restaurant, passers-by might have seen simply a family, a father with his teenage daughter and young son accompanied by a friend. They wouldn't have perceived the extraordinary journey that had brought them together, or the unique ways they had learned to see each other, or the remarkable future they were building, not despite, but because of the challenges they had faced. But the Mitchell family knew. With each step forward, they carried the awareness that had become their shared philosophy, that true vision transcends the eyes, that connection can bridge even the widest separations, and that sometimes the most precious insights emerge only when we are willing to perceive the world in entirely new ways.